The medical bay of Station Kepler 442 hummed with the soft blue glow of alien technology, but nothing could mask the tension that filled the air like a toxic gas. Dr. HFY's tentacles twitched nervously as he monitored the vital signs displayed on the holographic screens floating before him. The creature on the medical table was unlike anything he had encountered in his 40 years of xenobiology. The wolf was massive, easily twice the size of any Earth canine he had studied in the databases. Her silver-gray fur was matted with dried blood and strange luminescent markings that pulsed faintly with each labored breath. But what made every alien medical professional in the station keep their distance wasn't her size or her mysterious origins. It was what she carried inside her. "The readings are impossible," whispered Dr. Kythera, her crystalline exoskeleton clicking softly as she backed away from the examination table. "The fetal development patterns, they're not following any known biological laws. The wolf had been found drifting in a damaged escape pod 3 days ago, unconscious and heavily pregnant. The pod bore no identifying marks, no registration codes, nothing to indicate where she had come from or what species she belonged to. Initial scans revealed that she was carrying not 1, but 7 offspring, each one developing at a rate that defied scientific explanation." Commander Vexathul of the Galactic Medical Corps stood at the observation window, his 4 eyes focused intently on the readings. His people, the Zenthari, were known throughout the galaxy for their medical expertise, but even he was baffled. "Every time we attempt to approach for a proper examination, her stress levels spike dangerously. The defensive pheromones she releases are unlike anything in our databases." "Perhaps we should contact the healer monks of Altair," suggested Dr. HFY, his voice carrying the weight of defeat. "They have dealt with impossible cases before." "The healer monks are 3 weeks away," Commander Vexthul replied. "According to our projections, she'll give birth within the next 72 hours. If we don't intervene, both mother and offspring will likely die." The wolf's eyes opened suddenly, revealing irises that seemed to contain entire galaxies, swirling with colors that had no names. Her gaze swept across the medical bay, taking in the various alien forms clustered around monitoring equipment. Despite her weakened state, there was an intelligence in those eyes that made even the most experienced xenobiologists step back. Dr. Mithilo, a tall, reed-like being from the outer rim, nervously adjusted his scanner. "Her neural patterns suggest high intelligence, possibly sapient level, but we can't establish any form of communication. She doesn't respond to any of the standard galactic languages, not even basic mathematical sequences." "And the offspring?" asked Commander Vexthul. "Growing stronger by the hour, but the energy required for their development is draining her life force at an alarming rate. If this continues, she'll be dead within 2 days, and the offspring won't survive birth." The medical team had tried everything in their considerable arsenal. Nutritional supplements designed for every known carbon-based life form had been offered and refused. Healing fields that worked on 97% of known species had no effect. Even the universal translators, capable of deciphering the most complex alien languages, produced only static when pointed in her direction. Dr. Kythera pulled up a holographic display showing the wolf's internal structure. "Look at this. Her skeletal system contains metals that shouldn't exist in biological organisms. Her muscle fibers are denser than compressed titanium, yet somehow maintain organic flexibility. And these markings on her fur, they're not pigmentation. They're actually some kind of bioluminescent neural network extending through her entire body." "A weapon," whispered Dr. Mithilo. "That's what she is. Someone created her as a biological weapon." Commander Vexthul's mandibles clicked in disagreement. "No, weapons don't reproduce. This is something else entirely." The wolf shifted on the table, and for a moment, her markings flared brighter. The monitoring equipment registered a massive spike in electromagnetic energy, causing several nearby devices to temporarily malfunction. When the light faded, everyone in the medical bay could see that her condition had worsened. "She's dying," Dr. Zephi said simply, "and we don't know how to save her." It was then that the station's communication system crackled to life. "Medical Bay Alpha, this is docking control. We have an incoming ship requesting emergency medical assistance. It's a human vessel." Commander Vex Thul sighed. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only a few decades ago. While they had proven surprisingly adaptable and resourceful, their medical knowledge was considered primitive by galactic standards. "Tell them we're dealing with a critical situation that requires advanced xenobiological expertise," the commander replied. "Sir, the human captain says he might be able to help. He claims to have experience with, and I quote, wolves in distress." Dr. Kithara's exoskeleton rattled with what passed for laughter among her species. "A human thinks he can succeed where the finest medical minds in the galaxy have failed?" But Commander Vex Thul was desperate. In his long career, he had learned that sometimes the most unexpected solutions came from the most unlikely sources. "Grant them docking permission. But make it clear that this is a medical emergency, not a social visit." 20 minutes later, the human ship, Terra's Hope, docked with Station Kepler 442. The man who walked into the medical bay was unremarkable by galactic standards: average height, brown hair, and wearing a simple blue jumpsuit with the Earth Federation insignia. But there was something in his calm demeanor that made the alien medical staff pause. "I'm Captain Marcus Chen," he said, his eyes immediately finding the wolf on the examination table. "I came as soon as I heard." "Captain," Commander Vex Thul began, "while we appreciate your offer of assistance, this case requires expertise in xenobiology that—" "She's not an alien," Marcus interrupted, walking slowly toward the examination table. Every medical professional in the room tensed, waiting for the wolf's aggressive response. But instead of the expected spike in stress levels, her vital signs began to stabilize. "Impossible," breathed Dr. Zephi. "The genetic markers clearly indicate—" "Luna," Marcus said softly, and the words seemed to hang in the air like a prayer. The wolf's galaxy-filled eyes locked onto his, and for the first time since her arrival, the luminescent markings on her fur pulsed in what could only be described as recognition. She lifted her great head slightly and made a sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a growl, but something that spoke of pain, hope, and desperate need. "That's impossible," Dr. Kithara whispered. "How can you know her name?" Marcus approached the examination table with slow, deliberate steps. "Because she's not just any wolf. She's Luna. And she's been missing for 3 years. The monitoring equipment showed readings that defied everything the medical staff thought they knew. The wolf's stress levels dropped to normal ranges for the first time since her arrival. Her electromagnetic emissions stabilized. Most importantly, the dangerous drain on her life force slowed dramatically. "Captain Chen," Commander Vex Thul said carefully, "are you suggesting that this creature is from Earth?" Marcus placed his hand gently on Luna's massive head, and her markings flared with warm, golden light. "Not just from Earth, Commander. She's coming home." The medical bay fell into stunned silence as Marcus continued to stroke Luna's massive head. Her breathing had steadied, and the dangerous electromagnetic spikes that had been threatening the station's systems had completely ceased. The alien medical staff exchanged bewildered glances, their instruments registering readings they had never seen before. "Captain Chen," Commander Vex Thul said slowly, "you must understand how impossible this sounds. Our genetic analysis shows cellular structures that don't exist in any Earth database. The metals in her bone structure, the bioluminescent neural networks, the size alone." Marcus smiled sadly, his hand never leaving Luna's head. 3 years ago, Luna was just a regular timber wolf. She was part of a pack that lived near the research facility where I worked. But then the hegemony attacked Earth's outer colonies, and everything changed. Dr. Zephai's tentacles curled with curiosity. The hegemony? But they were defeated decades ago. Their technology was completely destroyed. Not completely, Marcus replied. Luna found something in the wreckage of a hegemony ship that crashed near the facility, something that changed her at a molecular level. He pulled out a small device from his jacket, and several of the alien doctors immediately raised their scanners. But Marcus held up his hand peacefully. It's just a data pad, Luna's medical history. The holographic display showed a timeline that made the assembled xenobiologists gasp. The transformation had begun slowly, increased intelligence, enhanced physical capabilities, and the gradual development of the luminescent neural pathways. But it wasn't random mutation, it was directed evolution. The hegemony artifact was a biological accelerator, Marcus explained. It didn't just change Luna, it prepared her for something specific, something that's about to happen. Dr. Kithara studied the data with growing alarm. These offspring she's carrying, they're not just wolf pups, are they? Marcus shook his head. They're the first of a new species. Guardians, designed by the hegemony's final protocol. When their empire fell, they activated a contingency plan. These children will have abilities that make Luna's transformation look simple by comparison. Guardians against what? Commander Vexthul demanded. Before Marcus could answer, the station's emergency klaxons began blaring. The main communications officer's voice crackled through the intercom. All hands to emergency stations. Unknown vessels approaching from the void zone. Energy signatures match no known technology. Luna struggled to lift herself from the examination table, her markings flashing urgent red patterns. Marcus helped support her weight as she managed to stand on shaking legs. They're coming, Marcus said grimly. The Devourers. The reason the hegemony created the Guardian Protocol in the first place. Through the medical bay's observation windows, they could see sleek, dark ships emerging from hyperspace. Their surfaces seemed to absorb light itself, creating holes in the star field that hurt to look at directly. There were dozens of them, moving in perfect formation toward the station. Those ships don't appear on any of our sensors, Dr. Mithila reported, his voice shaking. It's as if they don't exist. They exist in a different phase of reality, Marcus explained quickly. The hegemony discovered them centuries ago, lurking in the spaces between dimensions. They feed on life energy, consciousness itself. The hegemony's entire war machine was built to keep them contained, but when their empire fell, the barriers weakened. Luna's condition was deteriorating rapidly. The stress of the approaching threat was triggering premature labor, and her body wasn't ready. The monitoring equipment showed critical readings across all systems. We need to get her to a safer location, Dr. Zephai said urgently. No, Marcus replied firmly. This is exactly where she needs to be. The station's power core will provide the energy her offspring need to complete their development. Commander Vexthul's 4 eyes widened in realization. You're suggesting we channel the station's entire power grid through a biological entity. That could kill everyone aboard. If we don't, the Devourers will kill everyone in this sector, Marcus shot back. Luna's children are the only things that can fight them on their own dimensional plane. The first Devourer ship reached the station's outer perimeter, and immediately the lights began to dim. Emergency power kicked in as the creatures began their feeding process, draining energy from every system they could reach. Dr. Kithara was frantically working at her console. I'm reading massive power fluctuations throughout the station. Hull temperature is dropping. They're literally freezing us to death while they feed. Luna collapsed back onto the examination table, her body racked with contractions. But instead of the normal process of birth, her markings began to pulse in synchronized patterns, creating a complex web of light that extended beyond her physical form. She's creating a dimensional anchor, Marcus realized. A way to pull her children into phase with our reality so they can fight the Devourers. But the power requirements, Commander Vexthul began. We'll drain the station completely, Marcus finished. I know, but if we don't try, everyone dies anyway. The medical staff found themselves making an impossible choice. Trust a human's wild theory about interdimensional guardians, or attempt to evacuate a station that was being systematically drained of all life energy by creatures that officially didn't exist. Dr. HFY made the decision for all of them. He began rerouting power conduits to the medical bay, his tentacles dancing across multiple control panels simultaneously. If we're going to do this, we need to do it now. The station's structural integrity is already compromised. Luna's eyes found Marcus as her body began the final stage of the birthing process. The light emanating from her neural networks was now visible to the naked eye, creating patterns in the air that seemed to bend space itself. I need you to speak to them, she said, her words forming directly in everyone's minds rather than through sound. They will be afraid when they arrive. Only you know their names. Dr. Cathera nearly dropped her scanner. She's telepathic? Not telepathic, Marcus corrected. She's broadcasting on frequencies the hegemony designed their guardians to use, frequencies the Devourers can't intercept or jam. The first of Luna's offspring began to emerge, and it became immediately clear that these were no ordinary wolves. They were larger than their mother, their fur seeming to contain actual starlight. Their eyes held the wisdom of ancient beings, and their very presence caused the air around them to shimmer with barely contained power. But as Marcus had predicted, they were terrified. Born into a universe under attack, surrounded by alien beings they had never seen, their natural instinct was to defend themselves with devastating force. Fenris, Marcus said softly to the firstborn, a massive male with markings that pulsed like distant galaxies. Freya, he continued, addressing a female whose fur seemed to contain actual aurora patterns: Balder, Tyr, Heimdall, Vidar, and Hela. As each name was spoken, the corresponding guardian relaxed slightly, their defensive postures easing. They were still massive, still radiating power that made the station's hull groan under the stress, but they were no longer preparing to tear apart everything around them. How do you know their names? Dr. Mithilo whispered in awe. Because someone had to, Marcus replied simply. The hegemony's final records were very specific. The Guardians would only trust the one who knew their true names, who could speak to them in the ancient tongue. Luna was weakening rapidly, her life force having been almost completely transferred to her offspring. But she managed one final mental communication. They are ready. The hunt begins now. Outside the medical bay, the Devourer ships had begun their final approach to the station's core, but they were about to discover that their perfect predation had developed an unexpected flaw. Their prey had learned to bite back. The 7 guardian wolves stood in the medical bay, each one the size of a small shuttle, their star-filled fur rippling with contained power. The station's hull groaned under the dimensional stress their presence created, but they remained calm under Marcus's steady gaze. Luna lay still on the examination table, her breathing shallow but stable, having given everything to bring her children into this reality. The Devourers are breaching the station's outer hull, Dr. HFY reported, his voice tight with controlled panic. They're moving through the corridors like living shadows. Commander Vexthul was coordinating the evacuation of non-essential personnel, but his 4 eyes kept returning to the impossible sight before him. Captain Chen, even if these Guardians can fight the Devourers, how do we get them to the threat? Marcus stepped forward, placing his hands on Fenris's massive head. The great wolf's galaxy eyes met his, and suddenly everyone in the medical bay could feel the mental connection forming between human and guardian. "They don't need to go to the Devourers," Marcus said, his voice carrying an odd resonance. "They're going to bring the battlefield here." Fenris threw back his head and released a howl that transcended physical sound. It was a call that reached across dimensions, through the spaces between realities where the Devourers lurked. The other Guardians joined the chorus, their voices creating harmonics that made the station's metal framework sing in response. Dr. Kithara's instruments registered impossible readings. The dimensional barriers around the station are collapsing, but in a controlled manner. They're creating a battlefield where both realities can coexist. The first Devourer materialized fully in the medical bay's observation corridor, its form a writhing mass of living darkness that seemed to absorb not just light, but hope itself. The alien medical staff felt their life energy being drawn away simply by being in its presence. But the Guardians were ready. Freya moved first, her aurora-patterned fur blazing with cold fire as she leaped through the medical bay's wall as if it were made of mist. Her jaws closed on the Devourer's core, and for the first time in cosmic ages, one of the shadow creatures screamed. It was a sound that existed on frequencies that physical ears couldn't detect, but every soul in the station felt it. "They're pulling the Devourers into phase with our reality," Marcus explained, supporting Luna as she struggled to watch her children's first battle, "making them vulnerable to physical attack." More Devourers poured through the station's corridors, but they were no longer invisible predators. Under the Guardians' dimensional influence, they became solid, tangible enemies that could be fought, injured, and destroyed. Balder moved like liquid starlight, his massive form flowing through corridors that were too small to contain him. His presence brought warmth back to areas the Devourers had frozen, while his claws tore through their shadow flesh as if it were paper. Tyr and Heimdall worked together, the former's war howls disrupting the Devourers' feeding patterns, while the latter's all-seeing gaze tracked their movements through multiple dimensions simultaneously. They cornered a group of the creatures in the station's main power core, preventing them from draining the reactor that kept thousands of beings alive. Dr. Mithalo was frantically trying to treat personnel who had been partially drained by the Devourers when Vidar bounded past, his silent strength creating a protective field that restored their lost life energy. "Impossible," the doctor whispered. "He's actually reversing the feeding process." In the lower levels, Hela stalked through shadows that were darker than the Devourers themselves. As the guardian of boundaries between life and death, she could track the creatures to the very edge of extinction and pull them back into existence just long enough for her siblings to destroy them permanently. The battle raged through corridors and chambers that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The station's crew watched in awe as the Guardians fought enemies that had been unstoppable for millennia, creatures that had consumed entire civilizations. "How are they winning?" Commander Vexthul demanded, his tactical mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. "Because someone finally understood what the hegemony learned too late," Marcus replied, his hand still resting on Luna's head. "The Devourers aren't just predators. They're parasites. They can only feed on fear, despair, and isolation. But the Guardians represent something else entirely." Dr. Zephai looked up from his readings. "Pack behavior, cooperation, protection of the group." "More than that," Marcus said as Fenris returned from battle, his star-filled fur now literally glowing with victory. "They represent hope, the willingness to sacrifice for others, love." Luna stirred on the examination table, her galactic eyes focusing on her offspring as they systematically cleared the station of Devourer infiltration. Each Guardian returned to the medical bay between sorties, touching noses with their mother before heading back into battle. "The Devourers are retreating," Dr. Kithara announced in amazement. "They're actually fleeing back to their dimensional hiding spaces." But Fenris shook his massive head and shared a mental image with everyone present. The Devourer fleet regrouping in the Void Zone, calling for reinforcements from across the dimensional barriers. This had been just the first wave. "They'll return in greater numbers," Marcus said grimly. "And they'll be prepared for the Guardians now." Luna struggled to rise from the examination table, supported by Marcus's arm. Her voice, when she finally spoke aloud for the first time, was like wind through ancient forests. "Then it is time for the second part of the protocol." She looked at each member of the medical staff in turn, her gaze lingering on Commander Vex Thul. "The Guardians cannot fight this war alone. They need a pack." Dr. HFY's tentacles writhed in confusion. "You're suggesting that we—" "Not you," Luna said gently, "but your knowledge, your technology, your understanding of biology and physics that the hegemony never possessed." She paused, her markings pulsing with renewed strength. "The Guardians can create more of themselves, but only with willing partners from other species." The implications hit the medical staff like a physical blow. Luna was proposing a transformation that would create Guardian variants from every species willing to undergo the process. Xanthari Guardians with enhanced tactical abilities. Crystalline Guardians who could phase through matter. Telepathic Guardians who could coordinate across galactic distances. "The risks," Dr. Kithara began, "are nothing compared to the certainty of extinction if the Devourers break through completely," Marcus finished. "The choice has to be voluntary, but it has to be made quickly." Commander Vex Thul stepped forward, his four eyes steady and determined. "What do you need from us?" Luna smiled, an expression that looked strange on her wolf features, but somehow perfectly natural. "Just what you've already given us. Care, concern for a creature in distress, the willingness to help when help is needed." She gestured to her offspring, who had arranged themselves in a protective circle around the medical bay. "They remember every kindness you showed when I was dying, every attempt to save me when you thought I was just an unknown alien. That compassion is what powers their abilities, and it's what will save the galaxy." Dr. HFY was the first to volunteer, his tentacles already reaching toward Heimdall. "I've spent my life studying xenobiology. If there's a chance to become something that can protect other species—" Others followed quickly. Dr. Kithara approached Freya, drawn to the aurora patterns that reminded her of her home world's crystal formations. Dr. Mithalo knelt before Tyr, his reed-like frame trembling with anticipation and fear. "The transformation isn't permanent," Luna explained as her children began the bonding process with their chosen partners. "You'll remain yourselves, but with abilities that exist on multiple dimensional planes. You'll be able to fight the Devourers in spaces where they can't hide." Marcus watched as the medical bay filled with gentle, transformative light. The process was nothing like the violent mutations he had witnessed in hegemony experiments. This was creation, not destruction. Evolution, not weaponization. When it was complete, the medical bay contained not just 7 cosmic wolves, but a true pack that spanned multiple species. Each new Guardian retained their original form, but now carried within them the power to exist across dimensional boundaries. "This is how the war will be won," Luna said, her voice now carrying the harmonies of her entire pack. "Not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through beings who choose to protect rather than consume, who build rather than destroy." Commander Vex Thul, now bonded with Fenris, felt his consciousness expand across the station's entire network. He could sense the Devourer fleet regrouping in the Void Zone, but he could also feel something else, hope spreading from station to station, planet to planet, as word of the Guardians' victory began to spread. "They're coming back," he announced, "but they won't find us unprepared." Marcus looked out at the stars, where humanity's first Guardian pack was already preparing for a war that would span dimensions. Luna pressed against his side, her warmth a reminder that sometimes the most important battles were won not by those who dared to fight, but by those who dared to care. The pregnant wolf had been saved not by advanced alien medicine, but by a human who remembered her name. And in return, she had given birth to hope itself.